You may think letting go means losing your grip on something you love, letting go of the photograph, letting go of the memory, letting go of the person. But that's not what actually makes letting go so difficult. You can put the photograph down and still cling to it in your mind. You can stop checking the message and still be waiting for the answer. You can lose someone and spend years trying to hold on to what can no longer be held. The thing itself was never the whole problem. The deeper problem is the grip we add around it, the quiet insistence that what we love must not change, must not fade, must not leave. And once you see the difference between the two, letting go begins to mean something very different. To understand that grip, it helps to look at the man who spent his life discovering why we cling in the first place. 2,500 years ago, there was a young man who had almost none of that uncertainty to worry about. His name was Siddhartha Gautama. By the time he was in his 20s, he had a wife he loved, a newborn son, a father who had built him 3 separate palaces for 3 separate seasons and walls high enough that, according to the old accounts, he grew up years without once seeing an old man, a sick man, or a corpse. Every hint of loss had been planned out of his life before he was old enough to ask about it. By any measure his own world understood, he had already arrived. Nothing left to check for, nothing left to protect. And yet, beneath all that comfort, he encountered something no palace could protect him from. The fact that everything he loved was subject to change. The tradition describes a quiet tightening in him whenever he let himself imagine any of it. His wife, his son, his own body, someday not being there. He began to see that no amount of pleasure, security, or protection could make what was impermanent, permanent. He would spend the next years of his life finding out exactly what that clinging to permanence had already been costing him. Buddhist teaching has an old word for that particular kind of reaching. Not a mystical word, almost a clinical one. Upadana. It's usually translated as clinging or grasping, though neither word quite gets at the texture of it. Upadana is not simply the thing you care about. It points to the clinging that takes hold around it. You could think of it as the difference between holding something and gripping it. And here's what it is not, because this is where almost everyone gets it wrong the moment they hear the word. Upadana is not the photograph. It's not your daughter's childhood, or the door, or the memory of somebody you loved. Those were never the problem, and nothing here points toward caring about them less. In ordinary language, you might think of it as the grip added around the caring, the part that says, quietly, this must not change, this must not leave. Once you know the name for it, you start noticing it everywhere, not just in yourself. There's a woman, 67 years old, sitting on the edge of a bed, holding a photograph of her late husband. She has looked at this same photograph perhaps 4,000 times in the 2 years since he died, not because she needs to see his face. She already knows his face. She could draw it in the dark without hesitating. She looks at it because some part of her believes that if she stops looking, if she puts it down and doesn't pick it back up for a while, something will slip. The memory will thin at the edges. He'll become a little less real, a little further away. So she checks. The same way you check the door. The same way you reread the message you already sent. Her hand tightens around the photograph, not because the photograph is going anywhere, but because something in her is afraid that if her hand relaxes, what's inside, it will start to disappear. Here's what nobody has told her. The tighter her hand closes, the less she actually sees. The photograph is still there, but now she's no longer simply seeing it. She's watching herself try not to lose it. The photograph has quietly become a checkpoint, not a memory. Something to inspect for damage, not something to be with. There's a second person worth sitting with here, much younger, in his 30s. A father who keeps every photo of his daughter organized into folders, backed up twice, labeled by date. He'll tell you, if you ask, that he does it so he won't lose the memories. Reasonable enough on the surface. But watch him for a week, and you'll notice something odd underneath the reasonable explanation. He spends more time managing the folders than he spends looking at his daughter while she's standing right in front of him. Ask him what she said at dinner last night, the actual joke, the actual words, and he might reach for it and come back with only the rough shape of the moment. Ask him what folder that dinner photo is filed under, and he'll know instantly, without pausing. That gap says something quiet about where his attention actually lives most days. Not in the dinner. In the archive of the dinner. There's a third, smaller version, almost too ordinary to mention. Someone tells a story at a family dinner, a story they've told before, maybe every year around the same holiday, and halfway through, they stop. Wait, did I already tell you this one? Not because they forgot. Because some part of them is afraid the story has worn thin from being told, that it will eventually stop landing. So they check. Did that still work? Did you still laugh? Is it still alive? The story was never in danger, but the checking pulled the storyteller half a step outside their own story, watching it, instead of being inside it. Different objects, different lives. The same movement underneath. Caring becomes guarding. None of these three people did anything wrong. None of them is foolish or missing some obvious lesson everyone else already learned. What they're doing is what nearly every person alive is doing, quietly, in some corner of their own life. And it comes from something real. It comes from love. Nobody grips a photograph, or an archive, or a well-worn story, because they don't care about it. They grip it because they care so much that the fear of losing it becomes its own separate weight, sitting right next to the caring, so close the two start to feel like a single motion. But they were never the same thing. Most of us have tried to fix this the same way, without ever calling it a fix. If the memory feels like it's fading, look at the photo again. If a relationship feels uncertain, check in one more time. Ask one more question, send one more message just to be sure everything is still okay. For a moment, it actually works. The tightness in the chest eases, just slightly, just long enough to feel like relief. But an hour later, or a day later, the same uncertainty comes back, quiet and patient, and the only tool left is to grip a little harder than before. Others have gone the opposite direction. They've heard, somewhere, that the answer is to let go, so they try to simply stop caring, stop looking at the photo, stop checking the door, force themselves into a kind of practiced indifference. And there is something real inside that path, too. There is a kind of relief in not clutching so hard at everything. But held as a technique, forced indifference becomes its own kind of gripping onto not caring instead of gripping onto caring. The hand is still closed. It's just closed around nothing now instead of around something. What if neither of these was ever actually the choice in front of you? Not gripping tighter, not forcing yourself to stop caring. Something else, quieter, that was already available the whole time, sitting underneath both of those attempts. Picture a hand holding sand. Close it as tight as it will go. Squeeze with everything you have, and the sand doesn't stay. It runs out faster, through every gap between the fingers, the tighter the grip becomes. The very act meant to keep it safe is the thing pushing it out. Now picture the same hand opening, not dropping the sand, not throwing it away, just opening. The sand is still there, resting in an open palm, held without being crushed, visible without needing to be squeezed to prove it's real. Nothing was let go of. The sand never left. Only the grip did. This is the difference between holding something and clinging to it. Letting go is not throwing the sand away. It's no longer crushing it in your fist. Letting go doesn't mean releasing what you love. It means seeing the clinging that says you cannot be at peace unless what you love stays the way you want it to stay. Years after that restless young man left his palace walls behind, after he had tried every extreme he could find, starving himself, sitting through cold he could barely stand, pushing his own will as far as a human will can go, the tradition holds that he finally sat still long enough to see this exact thing in himself. And once he saw it, he is recorded as having said something almost embarrassingly simple to a group of people carrying nearly the weight you might be carrying right now. He said that pleasant things, the people we love, the moments we treasure, were never themselves the problem. Let them remain exactly as they are in the world. What creates the ache isn't the thing itself. It's the wanting, sitting quietly underneath the seeing, insisting that the thing must not be allowed to change. Someone who sees this clearly doesn't stop loving the pretty things of the world. They simply stop demanding that the pretty things hold still. Now, here's the fear that's probably sitting underneath all of this while you listen, and it deserves to be said out loud instead of danced around. If I actually loosen my grip, even a little, won't I lose it faster? Isn't watching closely the only thing standing between me and losing what I love? It's a reasonable fear. Almost everyone carries some version of it. Nobody taught you to believe that looking away is dangerous. It simply feels true, in the moment, the way a held breath feels safer than an exhaled one. But turn the question back around for a second. Has the checking itself ever once changed whether something stayed or left? The door you didn't check on a day you simply forgot, was it any less locked? The face in a photograph you haven't looked at in a month, has it changed even slightly? Waiting there, patient, entirely unchanged by your absence from it? The very thing you've been treating as the enemy, the fact that you can't hold on tight enough to stop any of it from changing, turns out to be the same fact that makes any of it worth loving in the first place. A face doesn't matter less because it won't stay exactly as it is forever. If anything, that's most of why it matters at all. The tighter hand doesn't preserve the thing. It replaces the thing with the act of guarding it. You stop tasting the coffee because part of you is checking whether you're still enjoying it enough. You stop hearing the song because part of you is already trying to memorize it before it ends. You stop being with the person sitting across from you because part of you is already grieving the day they won't be there anymore. The grip doesn't protect the moment. It quietly steals you from it, one small absence at a time, and this is where letting go is most often misunderstood. If letting go means releasing your grip, doesn't that mean you should care less? No. The opposite mistake is to turn this into indifference. A person who has trained themselves out of feeling much of anything, calm because nothing moves them anymore, peaceful the way an empty room is peaceful. That is not what any of this is pointing toward. Seeing this clearly doesn't mean forcing yourself to feel calm about the door, or the photograph, or the folders. It's not a new performance to put on, a calmer face over the same tight hand. If you catch yourself trying hard to look unbothered, to prove to yourself that you've let go, that effort is just the grip wearing a different disguise. Numbness isn't the goal here. Numbness is just one more way of not being in the room. The seeing isn't a mood you manufacture. It's closer to a light switching on in a room that was already there, showing you the hand exactly as it already was. Nothing added, nothing performed. You don't have to feel peaceful about it. You only have to actually look. And the strange thing is, the people who've actually seen this clearly tend to look more alive, not less. They still cry at the right moments. They still laugh too loud at the story they've told 40 times. They still call, just to hear the voice. What's missing isn't the feeling. It's the standing guard underneath the feeling. The love stays exactly as large as it always was. It just stops needing a second job as a security system. Here's a strange thing about that photograph, the one held 4,000 times. If you actually asked the woman to describe what she was looking at, in real detail, in the actual moment of holding it, most days she couldn't tell you. Her eyes were on the photograph, but her mind was somewhere else entirely, caught in the fear of losing it, in the checking, in the grip itself. The seeing had already quietly stopped. What she believed was closeness to her husband's memory had, without her noticing, become distance from it, replaced by the anxious motion of protecting it instead. So how does someone with a job, a family, a full and ordinary life actually live any of this? There's a common assumption underneath all of this, rarely spoken out loud, that a thing only stays real, only stays yours, if it's watched closely enough, held tightly enough, checked often enough. That looking away, even for a moment, is somehow the same as risking its disappearance. That's worth being honest about, rather than agreeing with as an idea and moving on. There's a real gap between agreeing with something like this and actually feeling it in the body, especially in the exact moment the hand starts to close. So for the next few seconds, without changing anything on purpose, notice your own hands, wherever they happen to be right now. Notice whether they're holding on to anything, physically or otherwise, a little tighter than this moment actually requires. Just notice. Don't loosen anything deliberately. That would just be another form of gripping, dressed up as progress. Just see it exactly as it is. The next time you notice yourself checking something for the second or third time, the lock, the message, the photo, the same worry circling back for another pass, don't immediately try to stop. Just notice what you're afraid would happen if you didn't check. You don't need an answer. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to make the fear disappear. The point is not to make the grip disappear. The point is to see the grip while it is happening. Seeing the movement is already different from being completely inside it. The door was fine the first time. The face in that photograph was never going anywhere. It lives somewhere no amount of looking or not looking can actually touch. What was disappearing all along was never the memory. It was you, standing just outside the moment, guarding it so carefully you forgot to be inside it. This was never about training yourself to want less, or love less, or feel less when you think about what you might someday lose. It was never a demand to loosen your fingers and let something fall. It was about the hand, seeing the grip for what it actually is, and letting that seeing, on its own, be enough to loosen it. Even this, the hand, the sand, everything said here tonight is just another hand, offering you something to hold on to for a few minutes. Once it's done what it came to do, there's no need to carry it home with you like one more thing to protect. Let these words pass through the way sand does, once they've shown you what they came to show. Tonight, before you close your eyes, you might notice your own hand one more time. Not to fix it, not to prove anything to yourself, just to notice what it's holding and how tightly. May it rest a little more open than it did this morning. Not empty, just easy, the way sand sits in a palm that isn't trying to keep it. Be well and stay awake.